Ladies and germs, look who's in the house. It's Mark Kennedy. Woo!
I thought this was all just a bad dream.
Oh, dear.
It's a continual nightmare.
The Big Sale Illuminati, where some of the best in the business discuss what's worked, what's working, and what's failed in selling big sales. Our panel of experts includes Clarity Seeker, a black belt of brands, our snarky marketer, Monique de Maio. CEO to CEO selling is his game. Fortune 500 in his lane. The Lex Luthor of the close, Mark Kennedy. The effective executive, a force on the boards, a buyer on fire, Tiffany Olson. David versus Goliath selling, the prince of process, Sun Tzu of big sales strategy, Tom Searcy. And that's your panel. Now it's time to talk about big sales.
Hello, everybody. This is the podcast, The Big Sale Illuminati. It's episode 21, and we're grateful for everybody who's tuning in and listening and giving us comments. And we're just grateful for our audience, small and large. Today, we have an opportunity to talk about this term that is in some dispute amongst the members of our group here, and that is the word decommoditization. If you look at Webster's, which is an ancient tome that few people even refer back to, you'll find that they don't have that word. But again, most people don't keep it in their home. Some people do.
I bet Tiffany has a Webster's dictionary.
You're dang right I do. And also, Tom, it's not in the Urban Dictionary either. So, say what you will.
Yours is in the Suburban Dictionary. So, all right, listen, we need to talk about this because everybody feels commoditized out there in the marketplace. It's amazing. The people that have unique offers in the marketplace have to fight this idea of commoditization. And some who win in the sales process do it well. A lot of people find themselves falling off because of reasons that we'll discuss today into this place where they're clawing their way back up to value and interest. So I want to give this over to Tiffany because her perspective and things that she's had to buy have been brought to her, considerations. I think she has a unique perspective. So take it away, Tiffany.
All right, thanks. So as you heard earlier, we are disputing whether this is a word, but whether it is or not, that's okay. Because in this podcast, you will learn what exactly it means, but more importantly, how to successfully differentiate your product, even if you don't believe that you have the power or authority to do so. So, all right, let's get to it. First, what do we mean by commoditization, which I know is in every dictionary? So what that means is when there is a competing product and it's interchangeable. So customers don't see the difference. So example, toilet paper, Charmin, Angel Soft. Tom, do you have a preference?
I would go with Charmin. From today's experience, yes.
I'm a quilted northern kind of guy over here because I have giant hands and the little bit of a wider cut.
Mark goes for Bounty. So.
There you go.
He's the quicker picker upper.
Yeah. In these situations, a lot of the decision is on price because the actual differentiation between the product, there might not be any. So let's start with this. And then later we're going to discuss how to decommoditize that product or services. So that's about having something that's distinguishable from your competition. And more importantly, that your customers value. So panel, first question. Have you ever sold or advised a company that has commodity products? So this is, do you sell differently if you're a commodity? What do you do or what do you not do in this kind of typical market? Anyone want to start with that?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. I think one of the things is that you are commoditized if you believe you are commoditized. And that's an issue of saying for salespeople and organizations, all we have to fight on is price, maybe speed of delivery, maybe consistency of quality. But if it's commoditized, there's an assumption that all those things are the same case. But the fact is if you're in a commodity business, you don't need salespeople. You just need a website. Go ahead and say, this is what the price is per day. There's always, always, always commoditization. I'll give a quick example. Chinese went ahead and dumped steel into the United States, which means they produced an enormous amount of steel, put it into the United States, and dropped our prices. Did they do it all at once? No. First commodity was rebar. That amount of steel that goes into streets and interstates and etc. Considered to be a commodity.
Lowest quality steel.
Yeah, poorest quality steel that's out there. And the U.S. response of steel companies here was to say, "Oh, well, we'll just give them that. It's the lowest quality steel, but we'll hold on." And what happened with that group, who now owns the majority of the steel that we have in the United States, is that they just kept moving up marketplace, but they pivoted so that it was price plus. I only say that because there was an acceptance on the part of American steel companies that they were a commodity. They accepted that. And by accepting that, they allowed their competition to walk in and take market share.
Excellent. Anyone else?
So I don't know, I probably started 6 or 7 companies, almost all of which were wild failures. And as Tom has witnessed over the years, and your question's a good one, which is, I think the real question is, this is one of those things where if you're let's say you're a reseller, which is the ultimate, the product itself, anyone else can sell, right? That's sort of so I was in a business that did services around a resold software product for years. And when you do that, what you have to do is you have to expand the scope of your service offering. And I'd like to harken back to a fictional salesperson that we call Kyle and talk about what a Kyle might do. And I don't want Kyle to actually understand what I'm about to tell, but he probably won't listen to the pod, so it won't matter.
The fictitious guy named Kyle.
This fictitious Kyle. So the first question is, who's the most powerful person in any organization?
The buyer.
Yes. But who's the most powerful person that works for the company that's selling?
The CFO?
Nope. It's the person that has the voice of the customer. So the person that's the closest to the customer in a B2B environment is always the most powerful person. This is the most important maybe thing I've said into the pod. So if you are a salesperson, the CEO, you are more important in your company than your CEO because you are the closest to the information that matters the most to your organization. And therefore, you're the most important person in your company. And therefore, you have the ability to shape your offering in the eyes of your customer, i.e., you have the ability to make up what your offering is, or specifically to change the scope of your offering. So if we're selling Duracell batteries, and you can get Duracell batteries at the Walgreens at the end of the street, you can buy them online for Amazon, but I'm selling them direct. I have to change the game from I have to change the scope of what's being offered to put services around those commodity items and provide a solution to my client that solves that problem. What I did back in the day was we had this software called Documentum, and then we had this software called Hybris, which was an e-commerce software that eventually SAP bought. It was this little company out of Munich, Germany, and we created services around it so that we could deliver this e-commerce platform by having developers in the United States on the Eastern time zone and developers in Beijing and Xi'an, which is 12 hours off the Eastern time zone. And we could do basically 2 full development cycles per 24-hour cycle. And in the process, deliver the work for a third the price and half the time. That's how you change a commodity product and decommoditize yourself.
So Mark, let me ask the question, because I totally agree with what you said, but what if you are a sales rep and you have, your product is not differentiated, but you don't have that power to change. You weren't the CFO, you weren't the CEO, you're just one sales rep. What recommendation would you give to a person like that?
For all other sales reps other than Kyle, I would say go rogue. You have to understand that what you're selling is your ability to create a solution for your client. And therefore, you have to change the scope. You have to bend the rules to your own outcomes.
So Mark is going to bend the rules. Monique, any advice?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this case, I agree with Mark. When you have products, you have to wrap services. When you have services, you have to productize. That's how you differentiate.
If you're selling a commoditized products and you're going to color within the lines, you are about to be in the unemployment line.
Yeah, I mean, you can't compare. You have to make the customer understand that you can't do an apples to apples comparison, because on paper they look so much alike, but in reality, this is what our solution does and has and includes. So you have to kind of create this bundle effect where the core thing might be a commodity, but the delivery of the thing has to be enhanced in a way that doesn't allow for an apples to apples comparison. Otherwise, you are in the unemployment line.
If we wind up with apples to apples comparison, I go back to the same statement I made earlier. Then all you're doing is facilitating bids. But to Mark's point, and let's just say I knew somebody named Kyle who all you could do was watch that particular person go rogue. There was no other standard position but rogue. You wind up with this idea that selling means in front of the customer, differentiating. That's what selling is. Other than that, if you're in a commodities business and you can't figure out voice of customer in front of customer, how to differentiate, get out of that company, all right, or get out of sales.
That's the part that drives me crazy about, we get these entry-level salespeople and they are so disempowered. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't this, I don't have that, I don't have this, I don't know that. I'm like, just get as close as you can to the customer, understand exactly what they want. And then you own the game. It's your game.
So sometimes though, and I come from a healthcare field, so rogue in front of a customer is sometimes an illegal activity.
Listen, no one's going to let me run a nuclear power plant.
Or have you give you the red button. It's not going to happen.
So I want to just share that I had become a leader of a company, and a couple of years before I got there, they had unique services and products. They had a very large leadership position, but the market changed, the competition came in, and it gets to that which we talked about. They had an acceptance internally and externally that they were a commodity. The top salesperson, the salesperson of the year that I awarded that award to, was the one who lost the least amount of revenue and market share.
Oh, dear Lord.
When I started, I thought, what is missing? And we've kind of talked about this. It was the voice of the customer. Because you bring the customer in. And if you don't have the power or authority to change your product, bring that customer in. And as the leader, I set the expectation, we're not going to be a commodity. Got folks to believe it internally, and we changed. But it was long. It was 5 years. We had new services, new products, and everyone then believed that we weren't a commodity, including our customers. We got a premium, but I was the leader, and I had that power kind of and authority to do that. You don't, because as you just said, Mark, there are a lot of salespeople who feel, not empowered at all. And they feel kind of more like a victim of, hey, I can't do anything. And whatever they say in front of the customer, they have to be able to deliver. But I have another example of where I wasn't empowered to make some of the changes. I was with a company, I was responsible for sales. I wasn't responsible for making changes to the product or the service. And this particular sale was all about the service, which sucked. No matter how much I would talk to the service manager, he just didn't care. Incentives were lined totally differently. And so I realized that I was the only one who felt pain. I was in front of the customer. I was getting chewed out. They didn't like what we were doing. I wasn't meeting my goals. So what I did is I started this campaign internally and in my mind of feel my pain. Others need to feel this pain. So what I did is I brought our joint boss in front of our customers for 2 days, and they unleashed. So what I learned is that if I personally can't make those changes, make sure that others feel your pain by bringing that customer in, because the customer is the one that ultimately is going to vote with their feet.
That's an awesome idea. That's like its own podcast, bringing the customer in to be able to tell your leadership what they don't want to hear.
Exactly.
I love it.
I love that approach as well. If you can't break through your internal perspective. You've got to get leadership closer to the customer. Again, we go back to, Mark stated that well. And as he said, it's probably the only value he's added to the podcast over the entire 21 episodes, but still,
for everyone has their moment.
Everyone has their moment. I really like what you said, getting leadership closer to that customer. And also what I really like you said is that there are no victims, only volunteers. People choose to be commoditized. They allow that market's attitude to be permeating.
You're exactly right. It takes energy and courage to do that. And that's why I think people don't do it. It's easier to not. Hey, I've got one. Tom, you remember when we used to work, when we did some of your consults, you have a 2x2, as every consulting organization has to have. You have a 2x2 matrix. And I forget the exact name of the tool that you have, but you'll dig it up, and hopefully we can even publish it in the a link to this in the notes. But it's your strategic or your tactical or I forget the two dimensions. You know what I'm talking about? Remember that?
The one I think you're talking about is price versus technicality, complexity. So it's price versus complexity.
No.
I've got a lot of 2x2s. I'm a consultant.
I know you are. You're a hopeless consultant. But this one of all the tools that you've given, this one we got the most out of this with the company I was talking about, Crown. So it was basically, the name of the game was you plot where you think you were on a 2x2 matrix. And I think if I remember right, it was like,
it's like the Gartner Magic Quadrant kind of thing, right?
Sort of like that. Yeah. But the vertical axis was like strategic on the top, tactical on the bottom. And then I think on the right, the horizontal axis might have been like impactful or impacted, and the left was like not. And the name of the game was you wanted to be in the top right quadrant, which you often entered an organization in, which is decommoditized, right? They buy you because you're different than what you were. And then as soon as they get you in the door, procurement, your customer, internal teams do everything they can to commoditize what you have. They break it down into little pieces, and they start to try to drive you from the upper, this is backwards, this quadrant down to this quadrant, right? That I think is a really important thing, because I think the most important thing about decommoditization is once you get in, how do you reinforce how do you fight off those forces that are there to commoditize you?
No, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you're going in there with the concept that you have a like product and you're apologetic about it, you're done for before you get in the door. But if you can wrap, service delivery, solution, services around it, experience, feeling, emotional connection, because a product is still a product, but you're selling to humans. You have to get that human closer to feeling like they feel better when they consume your product. AngelSoft, Charmin. I mean, I'm not saying AngelSoft, Charmin. Those are cute examples, but.
And by the way, I've worked extensively with Procter & Gamble in my life. I can tell you now, if there's a Procter & Gamble executive out there that's listening to this podcast, they are losing their mind right now. Their toilet paper is differentiated on a dozen different dimensions.
They have name brand recognition, which is a differentiator. I just want to ask this question because, Mark, this is one that, you brought up about you get in and then through all of those different layers, they try to make you a commodity.
Death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yes, easily. So what advice do you have? Let's say you've got a differentiated product. People high up in the organization. It's a huge bid. It's got to go through the RFP process. And huge deal, it's material to your company. But you have to submit line by line into purchasing because they want to, kind of commoditize each line and then pick away at each line on your pricing. You tried to submit without doing that, and they basically kicked you out. You got a second chance. So what advice, because I know you're a rogue guy, so what advice do you have?
This actually just happened to me, and it's on a deal that Tom knows about, and I will be completely candid. So we got a great referral into the chief marketing officer of a big box retailer. And this is a Fortune 100 company that is second in its market and is desperate to be number one. And we have a direct line of sight to help them achieve that based on how we engage with customers. So go through the qualification process with the chief marketing officer. And they say to me, what is it going to take to knock off XYZ Corporation? And I say, it's going to take 3 to 5 years, and it's going to cost you between $65 and $75 million, which is nothing in that market. And they said to me, okay, go ahead, do it. But you have to go through procurement. Great. This is a company, and by the way, this is a reality. So for those, if there are some salespeople listening right now, the 2 or 3 salespeople that listen to this pod, this is one of those things where I go, oh my gosh, do this or go rogue and do that. The realities of modern buying in a Fortune 500 company is you have to comply. You have to comply. I have written RFPs and then not complied with the response and lost. Do not do that. That is a dumb thing to do. So what I did in this case was I said to the team, I said, okay, listen, first off, they're going to take what we proposed and they're going to put that as part of the RFP. So the RFP itself will be differentiated because not only do we influence it, they copied our proposal and our sales material and put it into there. And we went through the RFP, and I'll tell you this, oh my God, it's hard. It breaks my heart. So we went through the whole process, went through the RFP, won the RFP because we complied with it. And on the back end, they came out and said, well, the budget's a third what we told you is because we categorize what you do as something different. So what happened was the procurement organization didn't understand the complexities of what we did. And therefore, they made a mistake in how they budgeted for what we did and put it into a non-working marketing dollars, which I'm sure Monique is sitting over there scratching herself thinking, I can't believe they did that. And as a result, instead of putting it into a working budget, which is what we do because we're a dollar in, dollar out business, $1 in, $3 out business. So we went through the process, and the unintended consequence was we're now an approved vendor. We now have a contract. We now have a client. But I now have to work all the way back around the organization to get back to the chief marketing officer to fix it out. Now, Tom said, go nuclear. Tell them you're not going to do it unless they get it right from the start. And, my take was, this is a Fortune 100 client. I need it. I need to get started. It's been a tough year. Marketing budgets are disastrous this year for everybody but airlines. So anyways, I took the deal. But now I'm in the process of going back through the whole process. Now, what I did get out of it was I said, okay, here's the deal. Here's how this thing scales, which is what I did. I said, this scales when I hit these targets, we start to charge you more money, which gives us more money to be more impactful. So it's you ask a great question. And this is one of the things I always, when I work with Tom, he's like, don't do this or do that or don't do that. I'm like, yeah, but there are realities of the daily realities of what I have to do. I have other people dependent upon what I do here. So
I would like to defend myself. The easiest answer is always yes or no. All right. But in the world in which we operate, we have to expand the options that are there. I think RFPs oftentimes are also vendor qualification processes. So it's just to be allowed out of procurement that you are a qualified vendor, that you have a certain amount of money, that you're bonded, that you've got technologies, whatever it is that they've got inside of theirs. Theirs is first to qualify you as a vendor. Secondly, their goal is to run a process that gets them as close as they can to a commodity measure of one versus the second. All right. So those are by nature what they are given. The quality of the questions in the RFP represents the opportunity to differentiate. If the quality of the questions are poorly written, there's a variety of options. One is to provide supplemental answers to the RFP. This is supplemental pieces. The second is to offer a proposal to your executive sponsor and answer the RFP. Because behind the scenes over cups of coffee or, rocks and sticks, your CMO or whoever it is going to be your buyer is going to talk to the people from procurement and tell them in some cases, they'll defend what the decision is in that. The third piece is because I would challenge with Mark, someone ate his budget. He had a budget that he proposed of X. His CMO said that seemed like a reasonable price. And someone in procurement ate his budget, and they were assisted in doing so by someone else who wanted part of that budget. I'm willing to believe that there are enemies behind the lines.
We probably got knifed in the back by an internal team.
That's exactly my belief.
So here, I have a question for Tiffany. So as the buyer on fire in this show, let's say you have a partner that comes in and does an amazing job for you, and you're the executive sponsor of that. So your department benefits from that directly. The question I have is, you start to work, and let's say this is a program, not like a short-term project. So these people have become integrated into your offering, and they're important to your outcomes. They're probably material at this point. They're between 10 and 20% of the impact of your department. And you start working, and the year goes on, and things are going great, and your relationship is awesome. And you come to the end of the year, and procurement says, "Oh, it's time for us to renegotiate a renewal for next year." That renewal, and they're going to say, "We want to understand," because this is what they always want to understand. We would like to understand how this partner that you're working with, Tiffany, stacks up against industry norms and standard rate cards. We have a standard rate card for what professional services looks like, and it appears that they may be outside of that rate card. How do you deal with that as the buyer on fire as an internal executive, and do you let your beloved partner get run through the ringer?
I'm going to say it depends, and I'll tell you why it depends. Because it depends on what internal politics are going on, how much power I have in that particular situation, how escalated that decision may be or become.
I feel like I'm about to get the procurement proctological exam at your expense.
Yes, you will. But this is what I would tell you, because sometimes those processes just have to happen. But and many times, this situation where you have that partner that you really want, but they have to go through purchasing, and you tell them that you got to do this. And, hey, you need to shave off 5% of your price, or, whatever that is, or let's build it for this, then let's increase the scope to this, or, you've got to have someone that will work with you. But if there is a very clear-cut policy and guideline that purchasing every year, every 2 years has to send the whole thing out to bid again, you need to make sure that executive sponsor has some power in that decision, because you don't want to be the lowest price, and you want to be within reason.
See that's a buyer's answer.
No. But I agree with her. That goes back to sales 101. So you're not selling to the person you're selling to. You're helping them explain and defend this offering to the people they have to explain it to. And that absolutely makes sense.
There's a couple other places. This has happened with Tiffany, probably happened with other folks. People say they want to renegotiate the price. My answer is, you're absolutely right. I think that our value is higher than the price that we're charging right now. And I think it's time for us to talk about a rate increase. And so the first thing on renegotiation is to say, I think there needs to be a rate increase. Tiffany, she doesn't want to tell you this. She's done this. She's done rate increases during periods of time of review during RFP processes. You can admit it. All right. The first step of knowing you have a problem is to admit that you have a problem. So you know how to do rate increases in marketplaces that are commoditized, because you offer a different level of value. The contract goes in. The people you're talking to used to go ahead and get discounts. Now they're talking to Tiffany. She knows how to sell. They get increases.
Yes, you have to, and you have to be able to deliver that value. So it's easier if the past year of when you've been working with them, you've delivered that value, and they know it. And it gets to, Mark, your question of, hey, if I'm 10 or 20% of the impact in the department, then you've got those sponsors. And so it's always, there's always kind of that range that you can push in. And if you go outside of it, then all of a sudden you're upsetting people. But you can kind of keep, I think, inching up. And I always say, if you put a price increase and you don't get pushback, it wasn't high enough. But it's very difficult to know where that edge is. You've really got to have some good market intel.
Well, so let's put a bow on this at the end of this. We could go on about commoditization, RFPs, RFQs. procurement, which are basically, I consider the spawn of the devil. However, not that I'm bitter. I think the bow on this is the following things. Number one, there are no victims, there are only volunteers. If you want to be selling rather than bidding, you have to be out there in the marketplace, finding the differentiation and being able to go through. Number two, the eyes of the customer, the voice of the customer, because the closer you can get that voice of the customer into your own organization, the better chance you have of being relevant and decommoditizing yourself out in the marketplace. The third piece I would put a bow around on this is that when you're out and you're looking for that differentiation, all right, you have to be in the position of believing that you can actually do that and discuss it. Otherwise, you're not going to be in that, what Mark's talking about, that top right quadrant, which is strategic versus impactful. Because strategic impactful is how you stay with your senior executive sponsor all the way through a contract. Because what they want to do by nature is put you into commodity management, because they have other things to do. To have value and to negotiate, you have to be impactful and at the strategic level. So great conversations with everybody today. This idea of commoditization, we got things like AI and others that are working for us to be commoditize what we do, means we just have to be better and better at not being a commodity. All right. Great episode for everybody. For me and the rest of the team, thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Big Sale Illuminati Podcast. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up and let us know in the comments. Also, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Until our next episode, best wishes on your big sales.